I think that's all the preliminaries. Let me introduce why this topic is so important to me before I introduce Andy. I went into teaching. I was a French teacher for a while, many years ago, but the reason I went into teaching was to work with young people around thinking skills. So as you can tell by the name of the company, Independent Thinking, 26 years ago, that was what drove me. That's what drove, it grew out from that. We look at learning, we look at leadership, we look at well-being, we look at all sorts of things related to it. But for me, thinking skills is at the heart of it. And I've had this question in my head for years now, which is, can you learn without thinking, and can you think without learning? And I think the answer to them is both. And I think there's a role for both of them as well. Learning without thinking is, it's the rote learning. I used to be a French teacher. I can teach people to know words in French without knowing what they mean. That's easy enough. But then it's the thinking without learning, that you can just actually enjoy and benefit from the process and the skill and the discipline of thinking without it necessarily leading towards something where you've remembered or you've learned a new skill that you can be tested on. It's actually the importance of just being able to think in and of itself has always sort of driven me. And then with what's going on at the moment with lockdown, what I realise even more so is that it's the thinking that's going to get us through this. One of the conversations I had in our What Now week was with our Independent Thinking Associate, Jazz Amplifar, who's just a brilliant speaker and a brilliant inspiration. And she talks about chaos navigators, as she was when she was at school. So she had a terrible, awful sort of home life and background, and it was all about trying to get through the chaos in order to get to school almost on time, almost with a uniform, probably not. And that was that for her, that chaos navigating is something that's helped her in later life. And in the conversation we had, we were suggesting that maybe it's the chaos navigators who have dealt better with the chaos of the last 6 months than those who are so used to having everything ordered and predictable, and they know what's going to happen next and they can make plans. Chaos is all we've had. So we've had to work through that, and we still are. Teachers in schools are still having to deal with things changing on a regular basis. And I don't just mean the DfE in England sending out their latest update, which changed everything. One of our associates is a head teacher, and he was saying it's actually, things are a bit calmer at the moment now. School's back because the DfE have stopped sending out information. So navigating chaos, I think, is the key skill above and beyond other skills or the acquiring of knowledge. They're important, but what did Piaget say? Intelligence is what you use when you don't know what to do. And we've all had our intelligence tested recently. So that's why, with that in mind, why I'm putting in refreshing independent thinking around this idea of thinking and chaos navigating and what you do when you don't know what to do, and philosophy for children, the thumbs questions without answers and complexity, and all of that sort of stuff is right at the forefront of what we're pushing with schools now around the world, which made me realize that the resource we had in this special little book, Gilbert Filbert, if you can see that, it's a bit bright under that light. Gilbert Filbert and his big mad box. It was an underused resource. We wrote it, and I'll tell you how that happened in just a little while. But we wrote it in 2017, I think it was, and it's now coming back to it that I think actually no, the skills that are in there, the skills, the principles, the disciplines around thinking, problem solving, possibility thinking, they're so critical, even more critical in 2020 going forward than they were in 2017. Which is why we decided let's have this pop-up conversation, this open webinar with the two people behind it, the two Gilberts, and we can just explain a little bit more to people the thinking behind it, why it's important, and maybe they'll go out and buy a book. At the moment, all of the independent, or many of the independent thinking press books there's a discount available. I think if you put NQT 30, I think it is, you get 30% off, even if you're not an NQT. Don't tell the Crown House publishers. Nina will sort that out in the chat room. But I'm sure one way or another we'll be able to get you a discount on this little book because it can be useful. And it also has free resources with it, which we'll come to later. So Andy Gilbert then, when I was first developing independent thinking, going around schools, especially around Leicestershire and Northamptonshire, around the Midlands, I kept meeting people who said, are you related to that Andy Gilbert? And I'm thinking, well, I've got a brother called Andy Gilbert, but I don't think that's who you're thinking about. Oh yeah, no, Andy Gilbert, he lives in Leicestershire. And it was like this strange ulterior universe where there was somebody very close to me and my family who I'd never met. So eventually, after many years, I decided it's probably best to track him down. So through Dave Harris, who also lives locally, we were all in Leicestershire at the time, Eventually I met up with Andy and just had a fantastic conversation about the stuff that Andy does, the fact that we're not related, but the fact that we had these parallel lives, including Market Harbour and the world of banking there, and it was all very odd, but our paths had never crossed. And I like a bit of synchronicity. It's always good to know the universe is sort of pointing in the direction of meeting people and doing things. So Andy sort of entered the life of independent thinking, and independent thinking is all the richer for it. So I want to introduce Andy at that point, and just, Andy, if you could just tell us a little bit more about sort of your background, what got you into this area of thinking, and what GoMAD Thinking is all about, what you do, who you work with, what happens.
Okay, so let's go back to when I first set up a business, which was in 1997, Christmas time. It was a consultancy. I was doing change management and I was doing career management. Those were my two hot topics in the corporate world. And I had a coach. I always believed in coaching. I was trained as a coach, and I found this guy called Tim. And when he was coaching me, he would draw my answers. So at the end of every coaching session, I got this fantastic piece of artwork. And one day he turned up, and I would pay him for a couple of hours to do the art for me and to coach me. He said, "What do you want to focus on today, Andy?" And I said, "Right, today I really want to focus on getting a mission statement for my business." And he said, "What do you want one of those for?" So I said, "Well, businesses have them, don't they? Mission statements and vision statements." He said, "I tell you what, why don't you have a passion statement instead?" I said, "What's one of those?" And Tim goes, "I don't know, I've just made it up. But you seem very passionate." So I said, "Well, how do we do one?" He said, "Write down everything that you're passionate about." So I started writing down, and anyway, 90 words later, we had a passion statement. But 3 of those words were making a difference, okay? And that's where the GoMAD comes from in terms of my company name. So I run a company called GoMAD Thinking, where the MAD stands for make a difference, and GoMAD is a rallying call or a challenge for people to learn, apply, go make a difference. So that was the origin of it. And then as I started to employ people, by the time I got to number 3, who was actually my father, I decided on my father's 64th birthday, I was going to employ him for a year. This was a boyhood dream to work with my father. He became my 3rd employee. Thankfully, I could get rid of him after a year because whilst it did work out, dream over by then. Anyway, employee number 3, Tim said, "Consult your employees and let's get this passion statement together." Right, so go make a difference. I was now philosophizing over a bottle of red wine and a Chinese meal in Bromborough on Merseyside on a change management project. And Kath, employee number 1, said to me, "Andy, what do you think the essence of making a difference is? It's in our passion statement, but what is it?" So we philosophized, had a bottle of red wine, didn't come to an answer. And I said, "I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to spend the profits of our first year in business and we're going to research the essence of making a difference." So that's what we did. So I went back to I did a master's degree in human resource development. I went back to my dissertation tutor and said to him, "Look, give us some help. I need to construct a research study around this." So we said, "Right, let's do a phenomenological study." Now that's the largest word I'm going to use today, but basically we decided to study the phenomena of people that made a difference. So we put an advert in the newspaper. "Have you made a difference?" Do you want to tell us a story? We got 1 response from a bit of a weirdo, so we thought that is not the method to do it. So I picked 3 people. The first was a 69-year-old who I knew who was doing a PhD, and I thought that's interesting, learning, 69, doing a PhD. The second one was a person that worked in the city and had a very successful business. And the third one was somebody that lived a very pressurized life and had managed to get a fantastic work-life balance. So I had a late learner, successful business person, and a work-life balance. I got one of my team, Ian, employee number 2, to go and interview these 3 people. He took a little digital recorder with him and said, at the end of the interview, which took about an hour, tell us a story about making a difference. Can you give me the names of 2 or 3 people who you know and you believe have made a difference, and then you can introduce them to me? And they did, and it was a friend, a family member, a colleague, and they were all delighted, and everybody said yes. So Ian went to interview about 6 or 8 people, and then did the same methodology again, and asked them, so the net spread all over the UK. Meanwhile, I took a film crew and went into 11 different UK businesses and asked them for role models of people that made a difference in all sorts of ways, whether they gave incredible customer care or were a brilliant manager or something. And then with all this data, we spent about 4,000 hours. There was 8 people, 1 full-time, 7 part-time, doing this self-funded research study. We basically came up with 7 key principles, because our research question was based around what is the simplest way of explaining the success process that people naturally use when making a difference. The only problem with that question was there was no process. It would have been lovely if it had just gone A, then B, then C, then D. There wasn't. There were 7 principles, but they interconnected to form a framework or a system. So we refer to these as the 7 key principles, but essentially it is what has now become known as a systems thinking approach for thinking about making a difference. And we simplify it and just call it a results framework. That was a very long answer, right? And that framework has now been taken around the world into 40 countries, over 300 organizations, and used by hundreds of thousands of people.
Brilliant. Okay. And it's this idea about making a difference. And teachers, good teachers, well, all teachers make a difference. Some don't make a good difference. Good teachers make a great difference. So this idea of making a difference is sort of in the teacher's genes, in education's genes, but also the idea of getting it across to young people, to children, including little children. The book is written for primary age children, that they are in a position where they can also make a difference. They can have an impact on the world is incredibly powerful, because it's easy to be quite passive in education. You learn other people's facts, you do other people's things, but it's about taking responsibility, having agency. And these are all things we know that are important for well-being. They're important for if you've got this sense of disaffection or dislocation from society, the idea that I can make a difference. I talk about hope quite a lot in the inset that I do, and the definition of hope, the best one that I can come up with is things can get better and I can do something about it. So agency, internal locus of control, everything is really, really important. And the latest World Economic Forum research on what are the skills that are sort of on the up, trending skills for 2022, they talk about leadership and social influence. And I think that's interesting, because it's easy to being leaders. There's always an implication that there's the leaders and there's the followers, and only certain people are leaders. Social influence means that anybody, look at Greta Thunberg, anybody through social media, through the way that we are connected these days, can have an impact on everybody else in that way of working. So I think this idea of making a difference, and you combine that with social media, with well-being, I think its time has definitely come, which is why I suppose we set about saying, okay, how can we take your principles, which you've said have successfully helped people be successful all around the world, thousands of people in serious big business, and take those principles and make them accessible for children in schools. That was our challenge. That was a difference we wanted to make. So what we did, we used my writing skills, I suppose. I'm an award-winning writer, so we can do that. And then your amazing knowledge of these thinking processes, the systems thinking, and we sort of just worked together to create a story that was meaningful, that was interesting, that was funny. Hopefully, we'll see. I'll read some bits in just a minute, but that integrated into the story your principles, so that a teacher could work with his or her class, or a parent also could work with his or her children, and have a really fun, interesting time, but also work their way through these problems and apply them in the real world. So with that in mind, I want to set the scene with, I'm going to read you a story. Just the first couple of pages from chapter 1. And I want to set the scene, and it explains the difference that is being made, but it also positions the story in our modern world in a way that is relevant, if you like. So chapter 1. So it's Gilbert, Filbert. See what I did with the name. Filbert Street was Leicester City's ground as well in the old days, and his big mad make a difference box. I'll explain the penguins later. So chapter 1. Wah! That was the noise that had woken Gilbert Filbert upon his most days since the birth of his baby sister, and today had been no different. Wah! When Gilbert's mum first came back from the hospital with his new sister Hilbert, she spent a lot of time with her. She would be the one to get up at all hours to stop Hilbert making that terrible noise, day or night, night and day. She would be the one feeding her. She would be the one mopping things up when it came out the other end. But then Gilbert's mum became tired, as Gilbert's dad explained to him one day in a way that gave Gilbert the impression tired meant something else. And that's why Gilbert's grandma was staying with them for a few weeks. And now it was grandma, with her carefully curly white hair, who would go in and calm Hilbert down very early each morning. When Hilbert was asleep, with his mum now in bed most of the day and his dad at work till late, Gilbert consoled himself with the fact that there was at least a certain amount of special time each day he didn't have to share with anyone but his beloved grandma, and that made him very happy indeed. Every afternoon he'd rush home from school, past the clock tower that struck 13 once every 17 years, past the factory, sad that it no longer made anything, along the side of the river where the supermarket trolleys lay on their sides like skeletons of robot mermaids, into the estate where he lived with its tiny orange and pink houses with even tinier gardens, where little children sat on plastic police cars watching him run past. Past his annoying 6-year-old neighbour, little Arnav, who would always wait for him to come back from school so he could ask him what his favourite fish was that day. Sunderland noodle fish today, Arnav. Down the edge of his house, letting the side alley gate crash behind him, and into the kitchen where he would find Grandma, sitting at the kitchen table with a pot of tea, 2 mugs, and a half-eaten packet of fig rolls. In fact, no matter how many fig rolls they ate between them, the packet always miraculously reverted to half full the following day, or was it half empty? So that sort of sets the scene. So it's a conversation really between Gilbert and his mysterious grandma. Now, I'll read one more bit and then I'm going to get Andy to sort of introduce the principles that are involved here and then lead us into possibility thinking as well. And we'll go through each one, and where I can find a sort of relevant extract, I'll read a bit as well. But let me set the scene. So in terms of the scene setting, it's that. In terms of the making a difference, now, Grandma asked Gilbert hesitantly as he took the biscuit his grandmother was offering him. Grandma raised an eyebrow. I've got a problem. Problems were tadpoles, there'd be no jam till Tuesday, said Grandma knowingly. Gilbert hesitated. His grandma had a lot of sayings like this, and Gilbert was never sure if they actually made sense. Anywho, he continued, like I was saying, I've got a problem and I was wondering if you could help me. When your dear old granddad, God rest his soul, was in China, replied Grandma before Gilbert could continue, he met an old man who said to him that every problem is just an opportunity in a hat. In a hat? Right, so why a hat? So you don't recognize it, of course. So what you're saying is I don't have a problem. No, I have an opportunity. Yeah, in a hat, in a hat. Okay, continued Gilbert in a hesitant voice. So my opportunity in a hat is this. Go on, encouraged Grandma, and she took a large bite out of most of the big roll. Well, we've got a competition at school all about making a difference. Whoever makes the biggest difference wins a prize. Making a difference, you say, said Grandma, cocking her head to one side. Yes, said Gilbert, it's a competition, you say, said Grandma, cocking her head to the other side. Yes, it is. A school, you say, said Grandma, cocking her head to both sides now. Yes, replied Gilbert patiently, my school. Whoever makes the biggest difference wins a trip to an attraction of their choice next month. An attraction of their choice, eh? Like the park? Yes, I suppose. Or the fun fair? Yes, or Clark Gable? Or the seaside? Yes, Grandma. The seaside, you say, continued Grandma with a faraway look in her eye. Very wet, the seaside, wet like an eel's hanky. So, continued Gilbert, having as much luck thinking about where an eel might keep his hanky as he had working out what a Clark Gable was. Will you help me? I really want to win, but I've no idea how to make a difference. So that sets the scene. And what happens is that Grandma tells him a story about a very mysterious box, a box with 7 sides. So what the story then reveals, each chapter at a time, is what is on each of the 7 sides of the box. Which is each of 6 of the 7 principles, and the 7th, we'll come to that right at the very end. And the first one is goal. So can I pass? Can I pass that over to you, Andy, in terms of the goal and the what and everything? Why is that important when it comes to solving problems and making a difference?
So I sometimes describe this, Ian, as if you wanted to go from point A to point B, and that was the difference that you wanted to make, it's really helpful to know where point B is. Okay, and the clearer you can make point B, the better. So when I'm teaching, because I always work with adults rather than kids, I use things like, say, if you were to get into a taxi, what is the first question that a taxi driver would ask you, and what would they say?
Where to?
And you go, not Norway. They'd look at you strange, wouldn't they? Well, where? Well, to the city. Which city? The city down the road, Leicester. Well, whereabouts in the city? They want you to be really precise, don't they? So they can drop you off, right, in exactly the right place. So if we're thinking about helping ourselves, it really helps to define really clearly what is the right place that I want to get to. Now, I'm not saying this has got to be a big goal. It could literally be, particularly in these times of lockdown and whatever, getting from one day to the next in a good mental state. Right? It could be achieving a grade at school. It could be, right, buying a house. It really doesn't matter where B is, but it's got to be important for that person. So a key principle of success is just knowing where you want to get to, okay? And it can be interim. So there's lots, I mean, I did a webinar today on 4 different types of goal defining, but in the book, we're focused on helping a child get clarity. The grandma role basically acts as a coach, right? A little bit dippy, and we created that role so she asked good questions to help Gilbert, as a young boy, get clarity about what he wanted to do so that he could win the prize and make a difference.
So the what, how we describe the what. So she says, Grandma as the coach. It is. I hadn't quite thought of her as a coach, but yes, she is, isn't she? Asks the right sort of questions, a knowledgeable coach. And she says it's about the importance of it being your idea, not somebody else's idea. Even if it's a bad idea, if it's your idea, it's better. And she says, for your what to work, you've got to have a goal that is so special, so exciting, so amazingly, unstoppably, nerve-tinglingly, heart-flutteringly, stomach-wobblingly awesome that you get excited just thinking about it, and you even get excited just thinking about someone else thinking about it, and that goal has to be yours. So that ownership, that internal agency, that sense of control is really important. So the what is there at the beginning. What's next?
You're actually touching on 2 of the key principles there, Ian, and you've mentioned agency several times. We'll come to that later, but one of the key principles about making a difference is personal responsibility. And that's really what Grandma's saying here. Gilbert, it's got to be your goal, and because you are going to be accountable for this, you are the owner of your goal. Okay, the other principle that's mentioned there, and another side of the box, is about having a strong reason why. So this is about desire, motivation, and energy. Look, anybody can have a goal to get from A to B. I can say that, I want to run a marathon, the London Marathon, in a time of 4 hours, right, next year. Well, that's great, that's a goal. I've specified my marathon, I've specified it's next year, and I've specified a time, and you could audit me on that. But if I haven't got a strong reason why, and I haven't, okay, I can't be bothered. So because this is a system, you need all the elements to be in place. So Grandma is really saying to Gilbert, right, get clarity about something that you really, really want that you're going to be responsible for.
And there's a story in there, which I'm sure if I remember right, is a story you told me about the guy who wanted to find the nose of the Sphinx in Egypt.
Yeah.
That was
that was me. That was actually on holiday. That was in one of my books here. And I wrote The Art of Making a Difference about 20 years ago. And I said that when I went away on holiday to Egypt, the tour guide was taking us around, and we went to the Sphinx there. And the Sphinx kind of like had been shot and by cannonballs and had bits broken off it. And one bit was the nose, and one bit was the kind of like the beard. And I was told that it was in a museum in London, and I just thought, that's not right. That it should be reunited. And I thought, yeah, let's make that a goal. So I got all excited on holiday, and I bought loads of postcards and things about the Sphinx. Came back from holiday, wasn't bothered at all. It was just a passing moment. So I could have a goal to reunite the Sphinx with its beard or nose, bits that have been shot off. But actually, if you can't be bothered, it doesn't matter how clear your goal is.
Yeah, no, I like that. There's been a lot of talk recently about why, the importance of the why and getting the why right. In terms of personal responsibility, which is, I remember when I used to work with students a long time ago, you know, you are responsible for your own success. Probably the number one thing I could have said to anybody at that point. And when Grandma is coaching Gilbert, she said, when there's something not quite right and you feel you want to make a difference, you've got 4 choices at the end of the day. You can do something about it, you can do nothing about it, you can do something about you, or you can go and do something else instead. And that's it, my boy. There are only choices you get. Yeah. So this again, it puts it back onto the individual. It's not somebody else's fault. It's not, I could have been better, I could have done this, I could have done that. It's down to you. Yeah. Sink or swim. I like that. Okay, so we've got a why. We've got a what. We've got a why. What comes next?
Okay, so at this point, you could go about self-belief. Okay, confidence. I talk about having a triangle, basically. And if you've got the what, which is the goal, you've got the why, you just need to do what I call a self-belief check, which is when you're thinking about your goal. I use a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is low and 10 is high. And it's probably a bit like a seesaw. So if you imagine that my pencil and the pointy bit here is self-belief, the rubber bit here is self-doubt. So we're poised equally at 5 out of 10. But especially in these days, people are having self-belief wobbles. You can go up, you can go down. But when you have a goal, it's basically saying, look at your seesaw of self-belief and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how high is that belief in the achievability of that goal by that time scale? So we might say here, it's a 7 out of 10. Here, it's a 10 out of 10. You don't need a 10 out of 10. Ideally, on the seesaw, you need to tip it in your favor so you've got more belief than doubt. So if you have a wobble, there's a bit of flex. And, you know, we could go deep into the psychology of self-esteem and self-image, but also we could just look at what happens when the government says something and we go into lockdown, when it causes us to go, oh no, I won't be able to do that. I won't be able to go on holiday. I won't be able to see a friend. And the belief in our goal can change just like that with a new piece of information. So it's really about assessing on an ongoing basis, if you keep your goal clearly defined, right? And by the way, I always use the word define a goal, not set a goal, because if you set it, subconsciously, the brain can easily think it's set in stone, it's set for life. Well, actually, if your self-belief dips, you might need to readjust your goal to make it more achievable. You might need to break it down into small chunks and steps. And again, back in the book, Grandma helps Filbert to break his goal down into chunks to make them more achievable.
Okay. The idea of goal setting is interesting because it's set, and then you end up, if you're not careful, achieving the things that the old you thought it wanted to achieve, but actually you're not that bothered now. So with the defining, it means you're moving forward, but there's a flexibility there and an adaptiveness and a willingness to change.
But it's also easier language, Ian, because if you say set, you don't say I'm going to unset that goal. But if you say define, you can say let's redefine that goal.
You can redefine without a sense of failure. Whereas to have a goal you don't believe that you've set is eats away at you, I suppose. In terms of the self-belief and the self-talk, and I noticed, I don't normally look at Amazon reviews, but I just thought to see what people were saying about it for the book. And somebody said how useful it was for the self-talk stuff. Yeah. I don't know, we all battle with that, and the imposter syndrome, and I'm not good enough, and all of that stuff that is with all of us all the time. And in the book, there's a Mr. Reaper who's a science teacher who is Filbert's nemesis at school, and who Gilbert feels he's not very good at science, and Mr. Reaper tends to agree with him. So what Grandma says to him, he says, well, you're not what anyone else says you are, including that Mr. Reaper, but you are what you say you are. So if someone says you're rubbish, they might well be wrong. But if you say you're rubbish, then you're definitely right. And if you say I'm never going to win that school prize for making a difference, then you're right, spot on, slam bang on the nose. So what it all boils down to is what we say to ourselves, not what others say to us. So, and I think it's just a little paragraph, and it comes off the back of the phrase, I am not my test scores, which is probably the main thing that I got from reading the Carol Dweck stuff. I am not my test scores. I'm not what somebody else says I am. I'm not a bit of paper. I'm not a score. I am the total of what I think I am. And then and that's flexible. There's a growth mindset linked to that as well. Excellent. Okay, how are we doing? We're halfway through, and we've got plenty to go. So we go from self-belief. We've done our what. We've got our why. We've looked at self-belief and self-talk and the seesaw, and I love that image. That's an easy one that we can work with children in the classroom. Number 4, what's on side number 4 of our 7-sided box?
Possibility thinking, okay, or as Grandma introduces it to Gilbert as possibility thinking. So, and we talk about how in the book we use the hands, 2 hands, to remind Gilbert Filbert to learn 10 key questions, basically. So the 10 key questions, remember this comes from the research, are you've got your goal, you know why you want it, you've got a level of self-belief, and you're going to ask yourself 10 questions, and these are the questions. They're all about how to get to the goal. We've done the what, we've done the why, we're now into how, but we're into possibility how. So what possible tasks and things could I do? What possible resources, stuff, okay? What possible reasons are there to involve other people in helping me? Who could those people possibly be? How could I possibly communicate what I want, my goal, to others? And how could I possibly influence those other people to get their buy-in? What are the possible obstacles, the blockers, the barriers, the things that might get in the way? What are the possible risks and implications as I go on this journey? And then what are the possible solutions, the ways to overcome the obstacles or to minimize the risks? And finally, the 10th one is, what are the possible assumptions, the things that I might be taking for granted that are worth exploring?
And what we did,
that's a toolkit that we use around the world just to help people open their minds. And then sometimes I even do exercises where we cannot go further until we've created 1,000 possibilities. And we're just in a numbers game here going, I know that if I can get a group of adults to generate 1,000 possibilities, there's bound to be at least 1 or 2 good ones in there. But you've got to go beyond the boundaries of recalled memories and short-term imagination to do that. Possibility thinking comes first, and then after possibilities, it's priorities. Sort out your best ones, the most important ones that are most likely to get you towards your goal.
I mean, one of the ideas about brainstorming they always said was you don't judge, you don't evaluate. I mean, there's different ways of doing it, but that's one of the ways. Just go for quantity rather than quality and think about it later. And what I've noticed in the work that I do in schools, especially around like philosophy for children and what actually in any aspect of teaching, children quite often, boys especially in my experience, like to lunge at like the first answer that's in their head so they can stop thinking, because thinking can be hard. And then but then if you said it was like your first answer or your best answer, and then you push them on. So I would always ask for, okay, I want 10 answers to this. I want 7 answers to this. 1,000 sounds good for a whole class. That would be great to work in that way. And what I find by doing it, and what other people find when I take them through it, is it's the ones towards the end that are the hardest ones, but are the most useful ones. The easy answer, the obvious ones are they come, they're easy peasy. But it's a bit like when you're doing, I don't know, press-ups and things. It's the ones towards the end that do the most good, but actually the hardest to get to. So pushing people to the 999th answer is powerful, but it does hurt. But it is powerful.
That's done normally. That would normally take you about an hour and a half to do with a group of say 8 people, and you do it as part of an innovation breakthrough workshop. But one of the things I do then is I've got a pack of thinking cards. And all of the cards basically go around that framework. So, for example, ace to 10 of hearts are those 10 possibility areas. But when you go to the diamond cards, for example, Jack of Diamonds is a great one. I don't know if you can see that there. But basically, it says turn a problem into a question, make it possibility based with what could I, how could I, or who could I, and then answer it 20 times. Okay, you're allowed to breathe, right? And, you know, but keep writing, don't evaluate. And you're writing, they will guarantee it will be something after number 10, very often after number 15, because you're having to do fresh thinking then. And that's one of the greatest tools that I use in the corporate workspace, the 20 answer technique. Yeah.
It's lovely as well. When I teach creativity, the people sometimes tend to sort of come up with ideas and then stop because they think they've used up all their ideas. And I'd say, well, go and step into somebody else's shoes. Is a thing I always used to do in my insets. You know, name a famous person, living or dead. Okay, David Beckham. Right, put David Beckham in charge of education, or Elvis, or I've had so many people, Maradona. In how many ways would things change? And I'm saying, well, as soon as you step into somebody else's shoes, you'll generate more ideas. There's an infinite number of ideas. There's as many ideas as there are shoes. So there's so many tools and techniques that we can use to keep the ideas coming. And I like what you did there with the language. So sometimes the language that we use, how can I solve this? What's the problem? Just by flipping the language, in how many ways can we address this challenge, is a very different, causes very different changes in your brain from...
Can I make a suggestion there, Ian? That we even change the word can to could. Because just notice the difference between if a person says, how can we? The brain can easily go, I can't. But if you go, how could we possibly? The brain finds it more difficult to go, we couldn't possibly. So again, I always use could rather than can, right? But then when we focus the mind, we change it to how will, right? Which of these will, and it's a more definite language rather than possibility language. And the example I use, you can use this with kids, right? I use it with adults. I say, right, how will you get home today? And they tell you. I go, right, how could you possibly get home today? Oh, ideas galore, right? Just by changing that one word, how will, to how could.
Incredibly powerful. No, that's really good. I like that. In how many ways could you can extend it even further. Excellent. Okay, so possibility thinking. By the way, these in the book, at the back of the book, there are templates. There are templates of, again, I don't know whether you can see this with the light here. There's a template of the fingers. Children can sort of draw around their fingers and write the 10 different possibility thinking approaches on that. And there's also a template of the famous 7-sided box. There in the, oh, there we go. Your light is there in the back of the book. There we go. Perfect. And I think if you buy the book, I think you get the link to download it from Crown House servers, and you can play with it. And I know, and there's a website as well, which Neil's probably put up, the Filbert website, and there are examples of primary schools that have used it, and their feedback from the children and pictures of what they've done with it. So it's a live resource that you can play with as well. Okay, so we've got a what, we've got a why, we've worked on our self-belief, we've approached possibility thinking. And by the way, the other thing I like about possibility thinking is, who else can you involve? How can you communicate with them? How can you get them on your side? I think that's
that's one of the sides of the boxes in its own right. So it starts with who could we do this, and then it goes to who will we involve. And that whole piece around involving others, you can expand people, because most people, when you say who could you involve, they go friends, family and colleagues. Who do I work with? Who do I live with? Who do I socialize with? And then you go, no. And in the book, Grandma goes, who has ever lived that we could involve? And we start getting people from history that have left a legacy of a way of doing things. And then again, you can go, but what if it's not just people living and people that have left a legacy? What about people that have never lived? Fictional characters, okay? And what's interesting, Ian, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but I do some work in mental health trusts. And I gave away 20 copies of this book as free gifts, as a prize to distribute. And I went to see them 2 years ago for like a visit to see. And in this children's and adults unit, I saw 20 big boxes. They'd made the boxes using the templates and decorated them all, right? And I thought to start with that, wow, this is fantastic. It took me 5 minutes to realize that these boxes had been made by 18 to 24-year-olds, right, with autism, right, and various things that, you know, kind of like were going on. There was one guy who hadn't been, a woman who hadn't been out of the house for 2 years, right? And a lad of 19 that was scared to get on a bus. Both had in treatment for mental health issues, and they had taken the guidance in this literally, right? And it was the first time I never ever thought we'd write a book that 18 to 24-year-olds were getting stuff out of. So it's not just the 8 to 11-year-olds.
Yeah, no, you hadn't told me that before. That's lovely. That's it makes it worthwhile, doesn't it? When you see books take on a life, an idea take on a life of their own and get adapted, especially in that sort of situation. That's lovely. Thank you for that. So number 5, we're up to number 5. So we've done the possibility thinking, which is the link to the how. What's number 5? Andy?
So well, that would be involve others, involving people in its own right. Whilst the 10 possibility areas cover 4 of those, right? Reason to involve people, people to involve, ways to communicate to them, and how to get their buy-in and influence them. It's that whole philosophy of thinking, I am not on my own, right? I once opened I collect little fortune cookies when I go to Chinese restaurants. And I was in a Chinese restaurant many moons ago, and one came out and it said, I have at my disposal the wisdom of the ages. And I thought, of course we do. It's about involving others. So involving others in its own right, once you really get your head around that, you go 6 degrees of separation, the internet, just a couple of billion people out there that I could involve. Getting a child, it's more difficult for an adult, believe me, kind of like getting them out of their fixed mindset sometimes to go, oh, I can ask people outside of my office. Yes, you can. Okay. That's the concept. Involve others. If you're on your journey from going to A to B, you don't have to go there for the first time, right? It's follow the path of someone that's trod the footsteps before.
Okay. And in the book, Filbert draws on for his challenge, Spider-Man and Florence Nightingale as part of his team to help him. So the challenge, by the way, without a spoiler alert and all that, the challenge that he sets himself, he wants to make his mum smile. That's his thing. I could think of all these things. I'd like this, I'd like that, I'd like a PlayStation, I'd like loads of money, but actually, how do I want to make a difference? I want to make mum smile again. And his mum, in the book, it tells you about a visit they had just before Hilbert was born, where they went to the zoo and they saw penguins, and his mum really loved the penguins. So he just, I want to make my mum smile. That's the difference I want to make. How am I going to do that? I'm going to get a penguin and bring it to the house. So that's I've got no idea how it's going to happen. I've got lots of things to think through, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the zoo and ask the zoo to borrow a penguin to make mum smile. So that's the point where we've got to in the book, and grandma is sort of coaching him through that. So, and Spider-Man and Florence Nightingale assist in the end. I'm not going to tell you how it ends. So, which means we're up to, so involving others. Now we're up to 6 then, Andy.
And so 6 is the personal responsibility. So as we touched on earlier, this is about the essence of taking responsibility rather than blaming anyone or anything. And the key thing is you've got some choices. Okay, you can choose your goal, you can choose who to involve from your list of possibilities, you can choose what action to take, you can choose how much time you spend on things, okay? You can choose to blame the government, or you can choose to make a difference to the child in front of you. Where you spend your time and energy, it's all down to you, and you have choices. But young people very often don't realise they have choices, and obviously sometimes they don't, in terms of not being of a certain age and able to do things. But the principle is about not blaming, taking responsibility, being accountable, and knowing that you've got some choices, and you can change your mind if things aren't working out.
Somebody once described it to me as they described it as the valley of excuses. That you've got people over here who want to do things, and you've got people over here who've done things, and in between is this valley of excuses. I would have done this, but like you said, the government or the whatever. And I sort of used to think of it as there's DDMs and there's DMDs in the world. The DDMs are the don't do moans, and the DMDs are the don't moan do's. And it's quite easy to choose which one you want to be. So you never don't. So
have you ever heard the expression? Have you ever heard of an expression? We don't have a blame culture. Yeah. I don't know whether that's common in schools, but where corporate land it is, we don't have a blame culture here. And I always go, fantastic. What do you have instead then? Because the opposite of a blame culture is a personal responsibility culture, where people go, yep, that was down to me. I made the mistake. And as soon as you can do that, it's liberating, because nobody can shoot you now. You can't go on a witch hunt, because that person has just saved a shed load of time in going, I'm responsible. So we have fun with that in our business. We've got 17 people here. And, you know, we make mistakes like everybody, but we have fun going, no, that was down to me. I made a mistake. No, it was me. I made the mistake. Look, I'm the boss. I employed you. What a mistake that was, right? So, you know, it's about ownership and saying, hey, it's okay to make mistakes as long as we learn from that mistake and don't keep repeating it time and time again.
I think it's important with what's going on now. I'm looking at the politicians where there's an awful lot of blame going on. Everything is everybody else's fault. And I think it's important for us to ride through this difficult political situation we've got now in lots of countries, where there are people at the top who are blaming everybody else apart from themselves, to sow the seeds of personal responsibility for a next generation that will actually do things a whole lot better. So that's another reason why education is so important. What society do we want it to be? We might not be able to change this one, but we can change the next one. And that is by what goes on in schools. Okay, so what's next?
So what's next? So that's the first 6 key principles.
Yep.
The 7th key principle is about taking action and measuring your results. Thinking is great, but thinking, ultimately, you'll just end up being a philosopher. You've got to move your body, you've got to do something and take action based on the thoughts. The better the quality of the thinking, the more likely it is that you'll have better quality or effective actions and you'll get results. If you're not getting the results you want, take personal responsibility, go back and choose which direction to go in, maybe redefine the goal, maybe involve other people. So that's it. Thinking leads to action, action leads to results.
In the book, there's a point, and you talked about the seesaw earlier, because there's a seesaw scene in the book. They're outside, and Grandma is challenging Gilbert on the use of what she calls the T word. Because he said, well, I'll do it tomorrow. And she said, what do you mean you'll do it tomorrow? Exclaimed Grandma on the way up to the seesaw. That's the T word you're using there, my boy. The T word is what that is. The T word, called back Gilbert, rather confused and on his way down. Tomorrow, cried Grandma on her way back up again. Oh, it's tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. It'll happen tomorrow. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. It's the T word that does the most great ideas. The T word is the reason why so many people never quite get round to making a difference. So she's very clear on about making a plan and then taking action. Without action, it's nothing. Mm. Right. How long we got? We got 9 minutes. So we've got making a plan. She talks to him about prevaricating as well, and challenges him on that. And she also talks about the. Well, actually, no. Go on. You go, Andy, and I'll.
Well, I mean, I think that's it. When you learn the 7 key principles of making a difference, they can seem very simple. You can make them more sophisticated, and build complex strategies of getting from A to B. Right? You can use it in all sorts of ways, and it becomes basically just a methodology for improvement. Either continuous improvement or going from A to B and getting the results. But when I was doing the research, I didn't realize that it would become what it would become as a model for, just key success principles, getting people from A to B. But the important thing is you have to do all 7 of them. One without the other in a system, it has a knock-on impact, right? If Filbert hadn't defined his goal, to put a smile on his mum's face, right? We actually haven't said, do you want to mention the P word or not?
I did mention penguins. Yeah, that's.
You did mention penguins. Okay, yeah.
I'm not going to say how it ends. I'm not going to say how he manages.
No, we won't say how it ends. So the goal is basically one boy's quest on how to get a penguin, and his reason why is to put a smile on his mum's face. Grandmother becomes the coach, asks a load of great questions to get him to think round this framework of key success principles very simply. Filbert uses his hands and his fingers to remember key questions, and basically he does some good helpful self-talk to build his confidence. He builds a plan. he takes action on the plan and can't tell you the ending.
I will tell right at the very end. We've got about 5 minutes to go. Right at the very end, I will read the last little bit, because some people who are alert or know their maths might try and work out why there is a 7-sided box where a net of a box is 6 sides. So I'll explain that one right at the very end. But if any of you, we've got 5 minutes, 6 minutes. If any of you got any question and answer, just chip something in the Q&A. Andy, in terms, I mean, we've talked about problem solving for children, and the book is aimed at them and the next generation of great problem solvers who we need now more than ever with everything that's going on. In terms of teachers themselves, they're under such pressure to respond, to react, to navigate with all that's changing, all that's happening at the moment. Have you got any sort of advice for teachers and school leaders out there?
Oh yeah, so much. If I had to, yeah, okay. If I had to nail it down into one piece of advice, it would be this: listen to the questions that you ask yourself in your head. Observe the questions that come out of your mouth and the mouth of others, and improve those questions. All right? If you improve those questions, you will cause yourself and others to think more effectively. So I really do believe that questions are the answer.
Questions are the answer. I like that. I like that. And again, it's the language that we use. It's our internal, it's our external language. It's coaching conversations, which, if you know, a few of the RTL associates are sort of top coaches, and it's all about the quality of the conversations that you have and the questions that drive those conversations. It's incredibly powerful. When
I was working, I do quite a bit of work in the NHS as well, and everybody gets a pack of cards, right? There's 110 questions in there, and they're all perfectly phrased. And then it's just knowing which question to ask myself or another at the right time. Am I asking red questions to open up my mind to possibilities? Or am I asking black card questions, the spades and the clubs, to focus my mind and build a plan? That's it. Oh, and by the way, Ian, I'll say it as a free gift to everybody. I can't give you a free pack of cards, but there is an app, a mobile app called Thinking for Good. And it's part of the values of our business that we adopt a Robin Hood principle. We do rob the rich to feed the poor. And I want to create light bulb moments around the world. So if you download the Thinking for Good app, it will change next week, by the way, with a new skin and extra things on. You get the equivalent of all these questions there. You get questions to kickstart the day. You have a coaching session on there from me for half an hour, right, of how to ask those questions in a sequence to take you from A to B. You have questions to solve problems and questions to go for a goal. So that's my greatest gift for you, and it's totally free.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And you were doing quite a bit of work for free with NHS during lockdown, weren't you? Whether you still are or not, I know, but you were. I saw from you, so thank you for that. That's great. Everybody does what they can to help. Somebody's asked a question about, do we feel that things are going to change in terms of children's creativity going forward as a result of the experiences this year? This was really at the heart of the What Now Week work that we did in May, where we did 20 odd webinars, which are all on the Independent Thinking website now. It's if all we're doing is trying to go back and close the gap and fit everybody retrospectively through a system that everybody else went through and not change the system, it's a huge opportunity that we've missed. But there is the opportunity to, which is why we're doing this webinar now, to start thinking in a different sort of way. And I think that there's a willingness, because we need navigators, not just people who know their knowledge. There is a willingness to move forward in that way. But it is down to brave teachers who could easily just say, no, it's about catch up. That's all we need to do. So, but it's not all about catch up. There are other things that we can embrace at this moment, and the future will thank us for it. Let me close the book with the 7th side. So, Grandma here, standing at the kitchen door. Yes, my boy, Grandma answered, not looking up. Do you remember when you first showed me the box? Yes, my boy. Well, you said then it had 7 sides, but Gilbert looked again at the box on the kitchen work surface behind where Grandma was sitting. The box, any box, has only got 6 sides. Grandma stopped what she was doing, put the pencil behind her ear, and gave Gilbert a hard stare. Is that so? Well, Mr. Cleverpants, with bells on, no mistake, Your Honour, I beg to differ. Pass me the box. Gilbert picked up the box and handed it carefully to his grandma. Now count with me, okay? Okay. Grandma held at the first side they'd looked at all those weeks ago. Gold, she read. 1, counted Gilbert. Grandma turned the box around in her hands to show Gilbert the second side they'd looked at. Reasons, said Grandma. 2, said Gilbert. Grandma moved on to the next side. Self-belief. 3. Next, asked Grandma, showing Gilbert the fourth side of the big mad box. Possibly thinking, suggested Gilbert. Possibility thinking, snapped Grandma, adding, just count you. That's number 4 then, replied Gilbert. And number 5, make a plan, Stan, said Grandma, which means number 6 is take action, said Gilbert proudly. Exactly, said Grandma. So that's just 6, that's 6, Grandma. There's no number 7, see? Is that so, said Grandma. Aren't you forgetting something? With that, Grandma grasped one edge and pulled it gently to reveal the inside of the box. I present side number 7, the inside. No matter what you achieve in life, it's what's inside that counts. Remember that, my boy. There we go, dead on time. Thank you everybody for coming along for that. I hope that's been useful. Thank you, Nina, in the background. I see you've been putting lots of links in and everything. If you missed anything, drop us an email, drop me an email, reply to the emails that you got from Zoom, and we'll sort that out. If you want to buy the book, please do, because we actually think it's quite a good book and it can make a difference, genuinely. But a huge and a special thanks to Andy Gilbert over there in Leicestershire, somewhere in rural Leicestershire, down a lane near a hill. It's been great to make contact with you. It's great to sort of see your energy and the passion you talked about. I think 1996, you had your passion month, and that passion still is alive and well, even in 2 dimensions like this, that still comes through. So thank you for that, and I hope we can continue bringing your ideas and passion into the world of education. So thank you very much.
Ian, do you remember the very last line of the passion statement? It ends, the answers are on the inside. That is the very last line of the passion statement.
It must be true. It must be true. Okay, everyone, Nina's going to close us down, but thank you very much. See you all again. Thank you.